Yes, I am the Apple Sheep, but today, since we're talking about Google products, I brought out all of the boxes I have that are made by Google. That is all of them. And no, I did not buy a Pixel 2 that was sent to me. If you were subscribed to Tailosive Talks, you would have known that. But anyway, why do I have such a bias against the Pixel lineup? So recently I was curious because a lot of YouTubers out there seem to really enjoy the made by Google products. This would of course count the Pixel 2 and Pixel 2 XL. A lot of YouTubers that I admire and a lot of YouTubers that I respect seem to side with Google in the format of making an Android phone like a Pixel phone, and yet I can't understand it at all. Whenever I'm watching that, I'm like, why? I don't understand how someone can like that. So I start to question myself and say, well, Drew, you are biased. Perhaps this is more of a blind bias and you're not letting any kind of logic or reasoning get to you on this particular topic. So I did a bit of research and went back, way back to some of the early days of Tailosive because I actually remember the Google Pixel leaks before the original Pixel, not the Pixel 2. Before that first keynote happened, I made a video on it, which I believe was October 3rd, 2016. It was a very different Tailosive back then, but I was curious if before the Pixel came out, I still had that same bias, so I went back to see what my thoughts were before it actually came to be. Just look at the Google Pixel C, a really small tablet capable of blowing up phone apps to huge proportions and looking ugly and being absolutely no one's favorite tablet. The team that designed those things is breaking into the smartphone market, and how are they doing it? By making a phone that came out last year. As in, it has some premium smartphone specs that are almost exactly the same as last year's Nexus 6P. Both have the same milliamp battery life, 3,450, 12 megapixel rear-facing camera, the same front-facing camera at 8 megapixels, the same aperture at f2.0, and if it's anything like the 6P, it won't have expandable storage. It does not have a dual camera, does not have an iris scanner, does not have modules like the Moto Z, or a removable battery like the LG phones. See, typically when you're unveiling a flagship phone, you want to cover the specs, sure, but you also want to add something that's unique to you. You want to add a feature that no one else has, or at least have a bunch of features that have never been in a single phone before. Hopefully there's some hidden features we don't know about yet that are part of that glass back that looks really ugly to me. But hey, if you're a Fandroid, you got me on the fact that it still has a headphone jack. Good for you guys. I'll get rid of it next year. So as you can see, I quickly discovered that I had biases against the Pixel design team from the start. Even though they had never made a phone before, just the fact that they had made that Chromebook that was $1,300, which by the way, since then has been discontinued. You can't buy that anymore. And the Pixel C tablet is kind of there, but hasn't been updated in years and years. And most people can agree that Android tablet markets aren't really a major competitor for Apple or Microsoft. But it was kind of fun to see that, hey, I was right about the headphone jack thing. Google did agree to go all wireless headphones with the Pixel 2, and it was just funny to see that way back in 2016, I predicted that correctly. But I think when a bunch of people are appreciating something, and I'm just looking at the tech specs and the features, and I'm not seeing why someone is so excited about something in particular, there must be something I'm not appreciating correctly. So I've watched a bunch of people talk about the Pixel 2, why they like it as their favorite smartphone, why they prefer the Pixel 2, and discovered the most common things said about it are mostly about accusations on how the Pixel 2 is different, in that you get a truly stock Android experience. In fact, Google often refers to the Pixel 2 as how Android ought to be. Now, this is very interesting to me because it appears like Google is making very similar steps to Apple. See, the difference between Apple and Google is Apple is not really known for their customization. If anything, Apple's known for giving you less options, less decisions for the sake of a better experience overall, because Apple has a history of saying, we know what's best for you, you don't realize what you actually want. The confusing part of it for me is that Android, for as many years as I can remember, for as long as it's been around, the people in my life who prefer Android are always bringing up the same things: options and customization. There is an unlimited number of Android phones to choose from, depending on what kind of hardware you prefer. If you want something super cheap or super nice, packed full of features, you have everything from budget Motorola phones to high-end Galaxy phones. There's just a vast array of selection that Apple does not supply because they believe in a one design, one approach take on the smartphone, pushing everyone to update to the latest iOS and not letting you downgrade. But I think the biggest issue I have with the Pixel lineup is that it starts to disregard one of the main purposes I hear most people switching to Android. So for instance, phones like the OnePlus 5T have the Nova launcher built into them. For those of you who don't know, Android has a ton of different versions of app launchers that change the way your home screen looks. Of course, you can get skins, you can get app icon packs, you can change the way your phone looks, you can change how the wallpaper behaves, you can change your lock screen. screen. Credit where credit is due, Android is very good at giving you lots of customization options, which I think is one of the biggest confusions I have with people who love the Pixel 2. They're always talking about stock Android. Of course, there's other topics, but I'll get into those in a second. Let's focus on that stock Android topic. What confuses me about it is they say, well, Google designed this phone inside and out. The software was designed for this phone and the hardware was designed for this phone, so things are optimized correctly. Companies should be designing software and hardware to work together. It's like Apple's been doing this for over 10 years with the iPhone. Now we're finally seeing Google start to admit that and implement it into their own lineup, and surprise, surprise, a lot of people might prefer that. Though the difference is, if Google is shooting to have a product that is how Android ought to be, I'm confused as to why the third parties, like the Samsung and the OnePlus 5 company and Essential, can make phones running Android have more features and more options than the direct from Google competition. See, if Google truly believes you should have options or that Android should be customizable because one of their biggest taglines is be together, not the same, I just never understood the together part of it. How come Samsung is able to beat you out brutally in terms of features? Not that it matters so much to me because I'm an Apple sheep guy, but I'm trying to put all that aside for this video. Samsung is still including a headphone jack, and if Google is so proud that the first Pixel had a headphone jack, why not agree that all of their users should have the most options and include that? Or expandable storage if you want that, something the Galaxy phones still have. One of the most hypocritical things for me is they get rid of the headphone jack, admitting that the future is wireless because they've designed Pixel Buds, which are a joke in themselves, and most people who try them aren't fans of them. Or just saying that there's other wireless options out there while not including headphones with the purchase, yet they don't adapt to wireless charging. Even though they've had Nexus phones in the past that actually support wireless charging, they don't want to bring that on the phone that's all about moving to the cloud. You have unlimited Google Photos storage. Everything's pushed up to the cloud. You don't need internal storage. You don't need 256 gigs. Why? Because you have all this cloud storage. The future is wireless, but yet you don't want to switch to Qi charging. You don't want to get the industry moving forward. Not that Qi charging is the future permanently, but it is a step closer to getting across the air charging and definitely at least embracing the Qi charging standard, or as Apple has done, made their own charging standard method that we have yet to see, and I'm very excited to try with the AirPower charging mat. Why not embrace that, especially if this is how Android ought to be experienced? My issue with it, being a guy who's used more Android phones in his life than iPhones, is that any Android phone I used, I customized to my liking, usually with the Nova Launcher. I love all the customization the Nova Launcher provides. You can make apps the way you want them to, and that's one thing I did enjoy when using Android phones, is that I could make the phone the way I wanted it to be. But now with the Pixel lineup, we have a ton of YouTubers and a ton of people out there who just say you should just be able to use Android out of the box and not have to customize it at all. I don't think those few minutes it takes to customize a phone the way you want it to be, even if you want it to be the stock Android experience, does not take that long, and it's not worth compromising on both the price and the features you don't get. I don't know if I've made this clear enough, but I'm extremely impressed with the Samsung Galaxy lineup. What they're able to produce is incredible, and I'm not saying that you should never buy an Android phone. There's people out there who simply don't like Apple, you don't like iOS, it's personal preference. I can respect that. What I can't understand is people who prefer the Pixel 2 because of its so-called exclusives, because there's barely anything exclusive about it. For one, I'll bring up the big thing everyone talks about, the camera. We get that you love your bokeh shots. Google's algorithm does a really good job of masking things out, but keep in mind, that has nothing to do with the hardware itself. In fact, next time you go complaining that Apple makes software exclusives just for specific iPhones, hoping that you will upgrade, keep in mind that Google does the exact same thing. In fact, Google has already started rolling out these portrait mode features onto the original Pixel and earlier Nexus phones. And in reality, keep in mind that via a software update, Google could add that bokeh artificial intelligent portrait mode option that they put on the Pixel 2 to any Android phone. In fact, whenever the next version of Android comes out, it's fully possible that any Samsung phone can now have that same algorithm. And this is something that is going to be continually getting better over time across all smartphone companies. Like the Essential phone didn't do portrait shots when it first came out. Now it's doing them and they look pretty good. The other thing that bothers me about the Pixel is the fact that they go for aesthetics over function, because we've seen phones for a long time now have glass backs and support wireless charging, but Pixel wants to go with this design scheme of having the top piece be a sheet of glass with nothing else being glass because that's unique, but you're actually backing yourself into a corner, because as long as that top piece is glass and the bottom isn't, you can't really support wireless charging. The phone's gonna fall off the Qi charger if you try to embed it at the top, so you're gonna have to redesign the Pixel significantly if you actually want it to support wireless charging methods in the future, or you're gonna have to stick with with a plastic back. Oh wait, you did that with the Pixel 2. So why doesn't it support Qi charging? I don't know. There are plenty of good Android options out there, and I would say when you're debating me about which is better, iOS and Android, the best defense you have against me as someone who loves debating and loves talking with people about this kind of thing, price is the biggest counter argument. If you cannot afford an iPhone, it's very hard for me to counterpoint that. And I'm extremely impressed by companies like OnePlus that's able to put all of these flagship features into a very budget-friendly smartphone or the essential phone, starting at $500, coming with 128 gigs of storage, extremely premium, well-built phone. Pixel 2 is not a budget phone. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If the Pixel phones were more like the Nexus lineup and they were actually budget-friendly, I could understand there being a lot of features that aren't on current flagships. It'd be like, okay, it doesn't have the top-of-the-line stuff, but it's trying to be budget-friendly. The Pixel 2 is flagship pricing for most areas and for most countries. By no means a budget phone, and yet looks definitely like a budget phone and lacks a lot of flagship features. For the sake of bokeh. Bokeh's nice, right? Or the fact that at the end of 2017, they finally said, now we have optical image stabilization. Something Apple's had since the iPhone 6 Plus. And I'm sure Samsung's had even longer. The exclusives that Apple has is the fact that iOS is only available on iPhones. You cannot get that on other phones out there, and a lot of people are comfortable with that ecosystem and what it provides, and the fact that Android is really just limited to being good on smartphones. Android Wear is a joke, doesn't even compete with the Apple Watch. Android on a tablet isn't working. Chrome OS is more just an overglorified browser. So that's the exclusives that iPhones have, as well as some hardware features like 4K at 60, the AirPod optimization and stuff like that, AirDrop, the whole ecosystem. You've heard me talk about it. But I don't see anything exclusive about the Google lineup, or if it is, it should not be the reason you buy that particular product. Just because when you squeeze a Pixel 2, the Google Assistant pops up, does that really mean compromising on not having all of these other great Android alternatives out there that can be cheaper and provide the same thing, or be the same price and provide a lot more? And if you don't like the Samsung skins, you don't like what they put on top of that, you can get the Pixel launcher. You can change these things very easily. So anyway, that's my thoughts. That's my little rant on the Pixel lineup. Let me know what you think of the Google Pixel and the future of Google down in the comments below. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.